Welcome to my elegant fellowship. I'm thrilled to have you on this journey with me. This podcast is all about exploring the timeless principles of personal development, and I'm Fernanda, your elegant host, guiding you through it all on the Elegantia Linea podcast. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist or a certified coach. What I am is a mentor, someone passionate about helping you explore and harness the power of your autonomy through self-awareness. What I share here comes from years of experience in process improvement, training, and personal growth, as well as my own journey through therapy and studying psychology. These tools have empowered me to navigate life with resilience and purpose, and I'm here to share them with you. The truth is that personal development isn't always linear. In fact, it's often messy and unpredictable. And that's why I'm here, to help you bring structure to the chaos so you don't feel overwhelmed by the uncertainty. My mission is to help you construct a life that feels purposeful and fulfilling, giving you clarity, direction, and the tools to unlock your full potential. If you stumbled upon this episode now, know that this is part of a series that starts in episode 2 and ends in episode 6. I highly recommend going back to listen in order before continuing with this episode. This is important because I gave you the foundational steps before, and it won't make sense to start here. Today, we're diving into the fourth phase of the DMAIC methodology, improve. This is where we take everything we've uncovered so far and start creating real actionable change. This is where the rolling up the sleeves process begins. In the last few episodes, we've done the hard work of self-awareness, defining what's holding us back, measuring its impact on our lives, and tracing it back to its roots. But awareness alone isn't enough. It's what we do with that awareness that transforms our lives. Improvement is about taking those first steps towards a better version of yourself. Steps that are often small, but incredibly powerful. Improvement, however, doesn't have to be overwhelming. Sometimes the smallest, simplest changes can have the most profound effects. My goal today is to guide you through this process, sharing real examples from my own life and introducing you to powerful tools like brainstorming and risk assessment. By the end of this episode, you will have practical ideas for creating actionable, effective solutions in your life. Let's begin by revisiting 3 personal stories I shared early in this series. Stories I intentionally left unresolved until now. These examples will illustrate how I've applied the principles we're discussing and how you can do the same. Let's start with my struggle with heavy drinking in 2015, which I shared in episode 3. At the time, I was using alcohol as a coping mechanism to numb emotional pain and overwhelm. Through the process mapping exercise we discussed, I traced this behavior back to unresolved trauma from an abusive relationship and the burnout that followed. Recognizing the root cause of my drinking was an important first step, but it was a conclusion I reached much later. At that time, I didn't know I was dealing with trauma. What I did know was that I was experiencing physical symptoms of burnout. Tremors in my hands, a racing heart, insomnia, daily exhaustion, emotional overwhelm, and even an eyelid paralysis. The cause-solution matrix became a crucial tool here. My drinking problem had multiple layers, but the immediate practical solution was clear: seek professional help. I began by consulting a neurologist who diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and depression. This was a step forward, but it only addressed the symptoms. It didn't touch the underlying emotional wounds. It wasn't until mid-2016 that I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder by a psychiatrist and a psychologist. This marked the beginning of my deeper healing journey. Therapy became a space where I could finally process the trauma that had been driving my drinking and other reckless behaviors. This wasn't a quick fix. It took me years to unlearn unhealthy coping mechanisms and build new, healthier ones. The process was made even more challenging by additional traumatic events that occurred after I began therapy. My healing journey has been anything but linear. That is why I always say that there is space for falling apart even after you have done the work. We never know what life will throw our way, but fortifying our emotional, psychological, and physical well-being is crucial to building resilience. Please remember this. Healing is not about achieving perfection, it's about progress. Improvement happens one small, intentional step at a time. For me, it meant addressing my anxiety and depression first and then gradually untangling the deeper layers of trauma that lay beneath. Next, let's revisit the story I shared in episode 2, the one about my habit of oversharing and the moral hangover I felt afterward. At the time, I often found myself opening up to people who weren't trustworthy or supportive. This left me feeling exposed and regretful. Through analysis, I discovered that my oversharing was driven by a deep need to feel seen and understood. This unmet need often bubbled to the surface when I was drinking, a habit that compounded the problem. My first step toward improvement was setting boundaries with myself. I began asking questions like, why do I feel the urge to share this? What outcome am I hoping for? Do I trust this person to handle my vulnerability with care? If the answers to these questions weren't clear, or if I felt impulsive, I chose silence instead of oversharing. Sometimes I even left the place altogether. At the same time, I began addressing the root of the issue, my drinking habits. Living in the Czech Republic, where beer is cheaper than water, made this especially challenging. However, therapy helped me understand my triggers and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Over time, I drastically reduced my alcohol consumption and learned how to set limits for myself in a way that became customary. I also channeled my need for expression into therapeutic writing, a tool we discussed in episode 2. Writing has always been a safe and private way to process my emotions without feeling exposed or vulnerable afterward. So I went back to it after stopping for a year. I wrote tales, poems, and lots of songs during those years and was at the peak of my emotional creativity. Over time, these practices helped me build self-awareness and confidence. If oversharing is something that you struggle with too, remember that not every thought or feeling needs an audience. Take time to reflect and ask yourself your 5 whys when you feel the urge to share. Sometimes, simply acknowledging your emotions for yourself can be enough. Finally, let's talk about my second burnout in 2022. This was a period marked by overwhelming responsibilities and constant stress, leaving me physically and emotionally drained. The first step I took towards improvement was learning to stop. I stopped saying yes to every request. I stopped trying to do everything on my own. The second step was prioritizing self-care. I made sleep non-negotiable and focused on nourishing my body with healthy meals. The third and perhaps the hardest step was learning to ask for help. This didn't come easily for me, but it made all the difference once I embraced it. Whether it was asking professors for extensions on deadlines, asking friends for help with household tasks when my fibromyalgia flared up, or leaning on family for emotional and temporary financial support, allowing others to share the load made the burden much lighter. Remember Barbara Streisand's beautiful words, "People who need people are the luckiest people in the world." You may feel like nobody cares, but there's always at least one person who would be more than happy to support you in times of struggle. One quick note here, asking for support doesn't mean offloading your problems onto others. No one can save you, but people can comfort you and help you push through. Ultimately, you have to do the work yourself. If burnout is something you're experiencing, remember, improvement starts by giving yourself permission to rest and recalibrate. You can't pour from an empty cup. Believe me, I've tried, and I can tell you, it doesn't work. And always, always, always seek professional help. Now that we have explored how improvement worked in my personal examples, let's talk about how you can brainstorm solutions for your own challenges. Brainstorming is all about generating ideas without judgment. It's not about finding perfect answers straight away, but about opening up possibilities. Here are 3 techniques you can use. The first brainstorming tool I want to share is mind mapping, which is a simple yet powerful visual technique. It helps you organize ideas and connect solutions to the root causes we uncovered during the analyze phase. This method is particularly useful when you're dealing with complex problems because it breaks them down into smaller, more manageable parts. How does it work? Start by writing your central problem or goal in the middle of a page. For example, let's say your goal is to improve work-life balance. From there, branch out with possible areas of focus like time management, setting boundaries, and self-care. Under each brand, you can add specific actions or ideas. For instance, under time management, you might write, create a daily schedule or use a productivity app. Example, imagine someone identified burnout as their main issue in earlier DMAIC phases. Their mind map could include branches like reduce overcommitment with sub-ideas such as say no to extra projects or delegate tasks. Prioritize rest with ideas like set a consistent bedtime routine or take short breaks during work. And then seek support with actions such as ask for help at work or join a support group or find a therapist. This method ensures that every aspect of the problem is addressed systematically while encouraging creativity. Plus, it gives you a clear visual representation of your options, which can make even overwhelming challenges feel more approachable. The second tool I recommend is reverse brainstorming, which flips the problem on its head. Instead of asking how to solve the problem, you start by asking how you could make it worse. This might sound counterintuitive, but trust me, it's incredibly effective for uncovering hidden insights. How does it work? Let's say procrastination is your issue. Start by brainstorming ways to make procrastination worse. For example, ignore deadlines, distract yourself with social media, avoid planning tasks altogether. Once you've listed these behaviors, flip them into actionable solutions. For instance, instead of ignoring deadlines, set clear deadlines for yourself. Instead of distracting yourself with social media, limit its use during work hours. Instead of avoiding planning tasks altogether, use a priority matrix to organize them. Example, if someone struggles with procrastination and realizes that avoiding structure worsens the issue, they might create a structured daily routine with set times for focused work and breaks. This approach not only generates solutions but also clarifies behaviors that are contributing to the problem. Both of these techniques, mind mapping and reverse brainstorming, are simple yet effective ways to generate solutions during the improve phase of the make. Whether you prefer visually mapping out your ideas or flipping problems upside down to find answers, these tools can help you take small but meaningful steps towards progress. The beauty of brainstorming is that it allows you to think outside the box without judging your ideas too quickly. Write everything down, even if it seems unrealistic at first, and then refine your list by asking which solutions aligns best with my goals. Which ones are practical given my resources? To be honest with you, I rarely brainstorm on paper to resolve my own problems. I have my own process, but I don't believe it works for everybody, and I'd be irresponsible to share it because it can backfire. I usually keep it in my mind, like playing strategies and outcomes in a game of chess, but this can be dangerous if you have a tendency to overthink and feel paralyzed. Instead, let me introduce you to another tool. Risk assessment. Not every solution will be right for you. Some may carry risks or unintended consequences. Therefore, after brainstorming different solutions, you need to find out which is the best to implement. Overanalyzing can sometimes be strategic. For me, it's a crucial part of making big decisions. For every turn, a different possible outcome. You need to assess the risks for each solution. As always, please pause the audio at any moment so that you can really dig deeper into the exercises with intention and clarity. Now you need to assess the risks for each solution. What are the possible risks? What could go wrong? What are the possible benefits? And which solution aligns best with who you are and where you want to go? Let me give you an example. Do you remember when I told you about how I finally admitted to myself that I wanted to have kids and get married? Well, now I can tell you the possible solutions to that conundrum. After uncovering the reasons why I wanted those things, I realized that I needed to understand what a healthy relationship looked like. I started searching for examples of healthy relationships in my life. I also thought about what I really wanted from a partner, what I liked and disliked in the examples of relationships I saw. In therapy, I began to understand my patterns and how to break them. For example, I realized that not admitting my true intentions when I went on a date hindered me from setting boundaries. I needed to change the pattern of not choosing. I was tired of not going past the first or second date and realized I hadn't even liked most of the people I dated. Deep down, I knew they didn't match my interests. And yet, I desperately wanted to be chosen. So I decided to start choosing consciously who I would date. To do this, I needed to assess some risks. Whenever I started talking to someone I was initially interested in, I began asking myself, what could go wrong? What would make dating good for me? Then I evaluated whether the potential benefits outweighed the risks. I'll discuss more in depth on the topic of relationships in other episodes, but for this exercise, I would like to discuss two aspects of it that were important when I addressed the solution to my problem. When it comes to dating, there's a constant balancing act between quality and quantity. While some people may focus on going on many dates, others may prefer to focus on one relationship at a time, making the process intentional and deeply considered. Both routes have risks and rewards, and you most likely have already begun to identify the reality. The risks of quantity over quality. If you choose to date many people, there's a certain level of excitement, exploration, and potential to meet new individuals. But it also comes with a significant amount of emotional toll and uncertainty. The excitement might soon be overshadowed by the following risks: time and wasted energy. Going on many dates, especially if they're leading nowhere, can feel like time and energy wasted. But there is a clear upside to this. You might find new experiences, meet interesting people, and have fun, even if it doesn't always turn into something long-term. Then there's compatibility gaps. The more people you meet, the more you run into individuals who might seem incompatible with you. This can be frustrating, especially if you keep going through the same motions without genuinely forming a connection. Every bad date can feel like another step back in your search for something meaningful. Then, frustration and desensitization. It's easy to get frustration with the process of dating when it doesn't seem to lead anywhere meaningful. If you're dating a lot of people, you may find yourself feeling desensitized. Perhaps no one quite measures up. The abundance of options might have you thinking the next date will be better while ignoring the present moment and what that person offers. Then, a shallow sense of validation. If you're constantly meeting new people, there's a risk of attaching your self-worth to external validation. If people show interest in you, it can boost your confidence, but if they don't stick around, it can leave you feeling rejected. When our emotional value becomes linked to external approval, it might affect your sense of worth. Then there's disrespecting boundaries. With the thrill of novelty, it's easy to lose sight of your boundaries. If you're not clear on what you truly want, you might be more likely to compromise in ways that don't align with your deeper desires. When you spread yourself thin, it's easier to forget or abandon your personal values or principles. In turn, this can lead to hurt or frustration. Finally, there's the worst: ghosting and hurt feelings. As you juggle multiple options, there's the unfortunate reality of ghosting, either by yourself or someone else. The more options you entertain, the more emotionally detached you become. This leads to unintentional harm by not being truthful or direct when things don't work out. Now to the risks of focusing on quality. If you opt to prioritize quality over quantity instead, the risks change significantly. One, we have pressure and expectations. By narrowing your dating focus, you may begin putting undue pressure on one person to meet all your emotional and relational needs. This can strain the potential for something authentic to develop because it becomes less about discovering who they are and more about achieving a special outcome. The more invested you are in one possibility, the higher the chance of unrealistic expectations. Then, loneliness and overdependence. If you're constantly searching for that one perfect connection, there's a risk of experiencing isolation or worse, codependency. You may begin to feel lonely when you're only focusing on one person, and in turn, you might be tempted to try to force something to work with them just because they are the one possibility in your limited scope. And then there is, jumping the gun. Focusing on a singular relationship, you may try to push intimacy or commitment too soon, even when you're unsure if the person aligns with your deeper needs. The desire for closeness can cloud your judgment, leading you to pursue something prematurely or attach yourself to someone before knowing them well enough. Here comes the emotional vulnerability. When you focus on one potential partner for too long, you may develop feelings for someone who isn't a match simply because you crave emotional connection. This can lead to painful situations where you're emotionally invested but the relationship doesn't live up to your expectations. Finally, intention and perfectionism. A focused approach often means you approach each date with a sense of purpose, but this can turn dating into a series of job interviews rather than a natural, fun experience. The pressure to get it right can make the process feel like a chore rather than a chance to explore and enjoy meeting someone new. Regardless of which route you take, having a contingency plan is key. Plan A allows you to navigate any potential missteps, misunderstandings, or disappointments that arise, ensuring you don't waste your time or emotional energy. Here's where you need to consider your options when you're on a date that clearly isn't going anywhere. First, end the date early. If you know it's not going to work out, you can choose to be direct and end the date. But while honesty is important, people don't always react well to rejection. You might face defensiveness, anger, or even name calling. It's vital that in these moments you stay firm and true to your decision and act with respect towards yourself and others. And please, don't ghost people. It is a disrespectful, cruel, and selfish way to handle a situation. Being emotionally mature involves facing uncomfortable situations, and it starts with letting others know how you feel. Second, remain calm and resilient. The reaction from the other person can be unpredictable. Whether they become upset, defensive, or agree amicably, your responsibility is to stick to your decision with confidence. Staying calm, polite, and respectful ensures you maintain your own boundaries and avoid escalating unnecessary drama. And third, decide what you want from the interaction. Do you want to salvage the moment and try to make it work, or do you want to gracefully exit? These decisions shape the outcome. If you know what you want beforehand, you can control your response and move forward in a way that aligns with your goals. Then, what is the right decision? Well, the right decision is the one that works best for you and aligns with who you want to become. The choices need to be made in accordance with your desired outcome. In my case, I decided I wanted to become a woman who was taken seriously, who was respected, who would be perceived as elegant and determined, who didn't easily fall back into depressive episode, who could quit the hyper-independence mode and trust a partner enough to rely on, who would eventually become a mom that didn't transfer unresolved pain onto her child, who would be a good partner, who wouldn't stay where she wasn't wanted, who would surround herself with people who truly cared for her and loved her, who would encourage people to do the same for themselves. The saga of building this version of myself meant that I needed to start carefully choosing who I would eventually marry. Therefore, I chose quality over quantity, after years of doing the opposite. And all those risks I mentioned previously, been there and done all that. Finding a solution means working towards improvement, but it is no guarantee that you will be free from mistakes. After all, you are trying something new. Choosing a quality approach doesn't mean expecting everything to fall into place overnight. It might involve long periods of drought, if you know what I mean, or uncertainty. But it's in these moments that growth happens. 2 years ago, I began working on becoming a person who doesn't settle for superficial connections, someone who makes decisions aligned with her values. The deeper work came from understanding my non-negotiables, those things that will never be compromised, and those areas where I still needed development. By continuously working on self-awareness and emotional health, you will develop the resilience to handle life's inevitable challenges. Your emotional and psychological well-being will strengthen when you approach any given situation from a place of clarity, so that even when things don't go as planned, you have the tools to recover and continue towards your desired outcomes. And we will discuss how to do this in other episodes. The best decisions stem from being intentional about where you're heading. When your emotional and psychological well-being is strong, it's easier to deal with the consequences of your choices. There is no other option. Every decision comes with trade-offs. Positive or negative consequences will always exist. If you're not ready to handle them, think carefully before acting. Assess the risks and know that the best decision is the one where you're fully prepared to face whatever comes next. In my case, I knew that implementing a solution could come with risks. Taking longer to meet someone special, losing friends, or stepping out of my comfort zone. But by looking at those risks and creating contingency plans, I felt more confident. Once I had my plan and risk mitigation strategies in place, I took action. I didn't wait for the perfect moment for all the stars to align. I made gradual changes, evaluated my progress, and adjusted as I went. And that's what I encourage you to do today. Start by brainstorming, prioritizing, assessing risks, and moving forward with clarity. Game, set, play. When you choose the way forward, don't look back. You've thought it through, so you're prepared. If it doesn't work over time, you can always reevaluate. How? Well, I'll tell you next week. Always remember that progress doesn't happen all at once. It happens step by step through intentional action and creative thinking. The stories I share today are just examples of how small changes can lead to big transformations over time. Whether it's replacing unhealthy habits with healthier ones or brainstorming innovative solutions for complex problems, every action you take brings you closer to living a more aligned life. Thank you for listening today. If this episode resonated with you, share your journey with me on Instagram. There, I'll also share additional resources, visual guides, and tools to help you along your journey. In our next episode, the final one in this series, we will discuss how to sustain these improvements over time so they become lasting habits rather than temporary fixes. Until then, take care of yourself and keep moving forward. You are doing amazing. See you next time and stay aligned. This is Elegantia, the podcast to help you unlock your full potential.